The theme of this event, I'm informed, is human connections, which I think is a very prescient theme for this moment in time. And so it feels appropriate to be talking about fungi, who are connectors. Fungi weave their bodies into relation with themselves and with their physical environments and with other organisms. My exploration of these entanglements has caused me to rethink much of what I thought I knew. Fungi trick us out of our preconceptions, and they invite us to question some of the categories, often very tired categories, that we use to organize our lives: intelligence, individuality, autonomy, independence. So there are many ways to be a fungus. Fungi are a kingdom of life. This is as broad and busy a category as animals or plants. But fungi have not received a kingdom's worth of attention, which is problematic for all sorts of reasons that we'll come on to later. Our ignorance is easily summarized. Of the perhaps 6 million species of fungi that exist on the planet, only about 8% have been described by humans. So when we think of fungi, we normally think of mushrooms. But mushrooms are just the reproductive structures of fungi, the place where they produce spores, which helps them to disperse. Most fungi live most of their lives as mycelium, branching, fusing networks of tubular cells. And mycelium is how fungi feed. Animals find food in the world and put it inside their bodies. Mycelium put their bodies inside their food. Fungi put their bodies inside their food using mycelium. And mycelium is a very diverse way of life. Mycelial networks can be so small as to fit on a speck of house dust, but can also range over kilometers. And in fact, the largest organisms we've described are mycelial networks that sprawl over kilometers. And mycelium is everywhere. In a teaspoon of soil, there might be anywhere from 100 meters to 10 kilometers of mycelium. It's a kind of ecological connective tissue. At school, kids are shown pictures of the human body as a network of blood vessels, a network of bones, a network of muscles. And if we could make equivalent diagrams of ecosystems, one of those pictures would show the mycelial networks tangling through the soil, through the bodies of animals and plants, whether alive or dead, through sulfurous sediments at the bottom of the ocean, along coral reefs, through the shells of crabs and lobsters, in the canvases of old master paintings hanging in museums, and in reams of unused fabric lying in the basement of ateliers. Mycelium is a way of life that challenges our animal imaginations. Mycelial networks have an astonishing capacity to regenerate. A fragment of a network can become a whole new organism, a whole new fungal network. Mycelium can solve problems. They can find their way through labyrinths. They're amazing transport networks. They're constantly remodeling themselves to respond to their local challenges. And they have astonishing metabolic prowess. They can produce enzymes and all sorts of chemicals that don't just break things down, but build things up, as we'll hear later. So imagine this picture again of the mycelial network strung through the world, but this time don't imagine a static network. Imagine a dynamic network, seething with activity. Mycelium is a living seam that weaves much of life into relation. It embodies the principle of ecology, which is the relationship between organisms, and it reminds us of the shimmering networks of interconnection and interrelationship that is the living world, that is life. For these reasons and more, fungi have found their way into interesting relationships, world-building relationships with all sorts of organisms over the history of life, including humans. They make interesting and valuable partners for us at this time as we adapt to life on a damaged planet, where there is medicines, penicillin, for example, which transformed modern medicine, was extracted from a fungus. As foods, new meat substitutes or mushrooms, which have been eaten by humans for a very long time. As in any kind of plant enterprise, whenever we grow plants, whether in forestry or agriculture in our gardens, we're cultivating fungi, because all plants depend on fungi that live in their roots and weave their way through their bodies, through their leaves and through their stems. When we harness the decomposition, the abilities of fungi to decompose materials, whether to break things down to compost waste, or to think about remediating polluted environments in the process of mycoremediation. As psychedelics, fungi change our minds, literally, often in really powerful generative ways. And also in the ways that they can be used to build materials which we can use to reform and rethink many of our industries. So thinking about fungi makes the world look different, and they're powerful allies for us at this moment of crisis and transformation. And at this point, I'd like to invite up my co-panelists to join me.
Thank you so much for such an amazing conversation conversation starter. We're about to have the conversation. I thought it was so interesting the way you talked about how mushrooms relate to interconnectedness, because that's what we're talking about here, and how they can transform the way we think about things. The first point of interconnectedness I want to bring us to is the fashion industry, Matt, because Imran introduced this session by talking about MycoWorks partnering with Hermes. And when we learned about this, we were so excited, because for all we had Cedric from Balenciaga talking about being at the forefront of change, the luxury industry historically has been very traditional. Hermes in particular is known for that's one of its great selling points. It is a traditional house. And so to convince the sort of pinnacle of luxury leather goods to sample something new is huge. So talk me through how you convinced Hermes to try mycelium leather.
Sure. Well, I think, of course, we're seeing right now that there's an enormous amount of hype around non-animal, non-plastic materials in the fashion industry. And the challenge that this area has seen so far is one around quality and performance. And what is amazing about mycelium, and that you described so well, is that the interconnectedness of these cells is something that at MycoWorks we have been able to tune with a technology that we call fine mycelium into something that allows it to be a platform for designers. So designers can now think about the material properties that they want at the very beginning of their process. They can start the design process with the material rather than with the object itself. And what that means is we offer these different levers, these different dimensions with which we can work with designers to change the mechanical properties of the material. So at MycoWorks, we've been able to create more of an intertwinedness in the material than what naturally occurs. And as a result, we can impart this incredible durability, this great hand feel, and create the emotional response that natural materials like leather already create and that we're already used to, because leather is a phenomenal material. Leather is the original performance material. It's something that we almost take for granted about how well it performs and the quality that it has. And so many materials that are on the market that are being marketed as alternatives to leather just don't have the sort of properties and emotional connection that leather can offer. And this is something that mycelium can, and that our technology, fine mycelium, sort of elevates. And so, with Hermes, it was all about quality, and I think that's something that MycoWorks has uniquely been able to achieve with this technology.
How with mycelium? What have you done?
So we tune the mechanical properties as it grows by altering the fermentation conditions, by performing different operations on our mycelium. And what results is a structure of these cells as they're growing in that is altered. It becomes denser, it becomes more intertwined. So What we're really doing is using it as a platform for material science. Like carbon. Carbon can be diamond, carbon can be graphite. Both are pure carbon, but what differs in the material is how the atoms arrange themselves. And so similarly, mycelium is this incredible material that allows us to change the way the cells are arranged to give these different properties. And so what the proprietary technology that we've developed is about are different ways to impart these new microstructures on the material, and in turn deliver a wide range of different types of leather-like materials. We can simulate a sheepskin, we can simulate a calf hide, we can then impart dyes and emboss patterns and anything that might be used to make it look familiar. But really, it's a new category. It's something that can stand on its own and is something that I think will ultimately affect the supply chain in the fashion industry very significantly.
And I think it was interesting when we were talking last night, you're not just using any mycelium, you're using reishi mushroom mycelium. And, Andrew and Simon, when I was talking to you, the reishi mushroom looms large over Dirtea as well, which is, again, this entanglement that we're seeing. How do you approach the mushrooms that you are using, and how are you looking at it this differently?
Yeah, I mean, really good question. I think when it comes to mushrooms, they have multiple uses, multiple purposes, and also solutions as well. So it was interesting you were talking about your founder was actually in the 80s during the AIDS crisis drinking the reishi mushroom, which, like all mushrooms, that we sell, are incredible for the immune system. They actually have this thing, they have polysaccharides, which is an active compound within all the mushrooms, which ours have a very high count of. And what that actually does is it's like an immune modulator. So if you're getting like an allergy, your immune system becomes like hyperactive, overactive, and it brings it down to a balanced level. If you're getting a common cold or a virus, it's underactive. So again, it balances it out. And I think, as we sort of move into this world around viruses and pandemics, one of the most important things we need to do is look after our immune systems, look after our minds, our most precious resources that we depend on for happiness, to be content. And the incredible thing is, the answer is in the forest. These mushrooms changed my brother and I's life. We had chronic burnout, we were insomniacs, kind of living that entrepreneur lifestyle. Things like sleep are seen as weak. But we saw when we inducted the mushrooms into our day and our morning, we took them to the gym, to the office, our lives completely changed. And because they're antibacterial, they're antiviral, they're anti-inflammatory. The chaga mushroom is another mushroom. It's probably in the coffee you're drinking right now. In 1 teaspoon contains the equivalent of 600 blueberries.
They are functional. You're saying that our friends are drinking these mushrooms. They're not psychoactive at all. But I feel being on this stage, by the way, we're like the kids in the mycology world. I hated science at school, but to be here, talking like Andy was saying, we came from a chronic burnout, and it was the idea of being presented with mushrooms to commence the breakthrough, as it were. And like Imran was saying, and what you were saying, there's been this wild misconception about something that's so healing. You spoke about flora and fauna, animals and trees, but I believe in the human life cycle. Our viewscape is trees, animal, plants. We never quite see the mushroom, but it's there, and it grows at night, and it perishes within 3 days, so you kind of miss it. But it's healing the planet. As much as it's healing the planet, it's healing, the future of our well-being. And what's extraordinary, hating science at one point and now loving it, because it took me a burnout to recognize there's this symbiosis relationship we have in mushrooms. So, for example, this may surprise you, but we share about 50% DNA of mushrooms, which I was talking to Merlin backstage, drinking these teas and seeing how they get into the circulatory system, why they're so bioavailable. The fact that you can drink reishi, which is one of the oldest mushrooms and most researched mushrooms in the world, has this incredible compound that basically calms the nervous system down, like almost, well, I call it the Woody Allen. It just shuts that thing, and it allows you to become incredibly present and almost increase the sleep. Because I came from a position of, sleep deprivation, and all it was, I just couldn't, quiet the mind down. And I think for anyone in an entrepreneurial kind of position or pushing the envelope in their respected industry, to have that kind of symbiotic relationship with mushroom is incomparable. And there is a global pandemic in anxiety as well. And what these mushrooms have taught us is that you can live a wonderful life from sunrise to sunset and bring these mushrooms into your lifestyle. The great challenge, I think, is always going to be is the fear that these mushrooms have. And I think by doing what we're doing, and by you all drinking our mushrooms at the moment, you're going to see how it's going to optimize your well-being. So the real mission for us is how many more people can be healed by these mushrooms.
Well, Marlon, how are you seeing this sort of mushroom moment that we're talking about? You know, we're seeing more use cases, more people talking about it, people being more open to trying mushrooms, you know, both in tea, but, you know, in Silicon Valley, people are microdosing left, right, and center. You know, how are you seeing this change? What do you think it could mean for the way we view fungi?
Well, I think it means a lot. I mean, it's a very welcome change from my point of view. It's overcoming centuries of mycophobia. Worth pointing out, though, in some parts of the world, some cultures, some East Asian cultures, mushrooms have been loved for many, many years, and drunk as teas and used as medicines and eaten as foods, and all sorts of mushrooms. In some parts of Yunnan province, there's hundreds of different edible mushrooms eaten. Right? Think of how many you find in the supermarket here. So in some sense, we're just catching up, and it's about time.
And what's the opportunity here? You know, what have we lost by spending so long not focusing on fungi?
Fungi hold the biosphere together. And if we don't think about them, if we don't enlarge, deepen, and expand our awareness to include the jobs that they do in the soil, in dead and dying plant material, which is actually the beginning of whole new sets of lives, then we'll damage these lives, these fungal lives, without realizing. And you can see this taking place over the course of the 20th century with industrial agriculture, for example. Application of huge amounts of chemicals, whether herbicides, fungicides, or fertilizers. Massive disruption to the soil compaction. We're losing so much soil, we're losing so many fungal habitats because we weren't thinking about them. We weren't thinking about these organisms that live in the soil and who do so much, who create the space in which we live. We walk around in the space that decomposition leaves behind.
Although I think we were quite capable of ruining things that we were aware of too, based on how we've been going. But I do think fungi offer a really good solution. And Matt, I think it's really interesting in the context of some of the challenges for fashion in particular that we've been talking about this morning and you know, yesterday with the sessions we recorded around sustainability. You know, how much do you see, or how quickly could we see your, you know, MycoWorks leather alternative moving into the industry in products, scaling up, you know, actually transforming the way we think about the products we have?
Well, we're seeing incredible demand for these sorts of materials, and I think the really interesting thing to us is that this demand is not only based on sustainability. Of course, you have you know, an overwhelming drive from consumers right now for brands to offer sustainable products. But I think at the same time, brands are looking at their supply chains. This predated COVID, right? Supply chain is now a word that fortunately we all, I think, have seen a little bit too much of lately. But even before COVID, the industry was looking at their supply chain for materials and trying to figure out how are they going to fuel the next 20 or 30 years of growth, right? You've seen this explosive growth in the luxury industry over the past couple decades, driven in large part by the developing world. And now we've really, in a lot of ways, maxed out many of the sources of high quality materials. And so where is the next 20 years of high quality natural materials going to come from? And that's where I think fine mycelium plays a major role. So we're working on expanding as quickly as possible. We have a plant that's open in California right now. We have another plant, a very large plant that we'll be excited to announce some more news on soon. And then we're hoping to build many additional plants after that. And I think the opportunities that this platform offers to co-locate plants with leather tanneries, with finished good fabrication plants, allows all kinds of efficiencies, whether it's waste reduction, just-in-time delivery, a made-to-order, made-to-spec natural material, which is really the first of its kind. All of these things allow brands to now think about a new supply chain where sustainability is just part of it. Sustainability is the new table stakes, right? You just have to have sustainability in anything that you do that's new now. And I believe that you have to have more than that to have a lasting change, though. There has to be other efficiencies that can be gained, other value that can be added. And I think that's where mycelium is going to play a role.
Is there a contradiction in there, though? Fueling growth through while also pursuing something more sustainable?
I think that these things can coexist as the industry brings more circularity into their supply chains overall, and we play a role in that. And we're heartened to see that brands are beginning to think more and more holistically about that.
And I think what we're talking about here has huge potential and huge opportunity. But Simon, you mentioned the fear around mushrooms. What are the barriers to change that we're seeing?
Well, firstly, I know growing up, surrounded by authority figures that would violently point at a mushroom and tell you not to touch it because it's poisonous. I think there's a misconception, there's a narrative that needs to be changed. Hence, you say this is business, and it is a business, but there's something way beyond that. There's a moral compass, like there's an education that needs to be handed to the mass and to a younger generation as well. So for us, it's really about utilizing these extraordinary, profound findings and research that Merlin is talking about, and almost
more accessible,
simplifying it.
Yeah.
Because Andy was using a lot of words before, and some of them are very scientific.
I mean, what we've tried to do is break every mushroom down into its core purpose. So lion's mane, we talk about being the focus mushroom, so people know they can, perform better mentally. We talk about cordyceps as sort of the energy mushroom, giving you natural energy. Chaga is the immunity mushroom. Reishi is the calm and the sleep mushroom as well. But I think what we're trying to do is looking at, brands that sort of sit at every sort of, corner street like Starbucks. And people are complaining about their coffee. They talk about sort of stimulation. They talk about mid-afternoon crashes. Talk about being anxious, stressed out, not being able to sleep. So we look at a situation like that as what's the solution to a drink that people still want to have, rather than alternative coffee, alternative to coffee. What can we do in terms of an alternative coffee? So what we've done is reduce the caffeine by under 50%, so it stops that stimulation. We've added the mushrooms in so you get that natural energy. So you get this slow release of energy all day, so you don't have to stop reaching for it at 3 p.m. again. But then also it's giving you a better, stronger immune system. It's making your skin glow. And then what's getting reported to us, actually people are sleeping better, and even insomniacs, which is the most exciting thing.
What do you see, Merlin, as being the barriers here?
Just to point out that I think it's important to remember that fungi haven't been busily evolving for 1 billion years to make our skin glow.
It's a nice side effect, though.
Nice though it may be. So do I. So I think there are lots of barriers, but ignorance is one. Fungi haven't had this kingdom's worth of attention, as I say, so they don't have good representation in school science curricula. Mm-hmm. They don't have as much research funds. They don't have university departments and professors and students. And this means we just know less. There's less investment. There are less fungal businesses looking to solve problems with fungi. So I think that's part of it. Part of it is that this ignorance comes from the fact they live their lives out of sight. They're hard for us to know about. They're hard for us to see. And researching them is a big challenge. And this is one of the fun things about working with fungi, but it's also, it's not easy.
Do you think we're at a tipping point? I mean, in your talk, you spoke about all of these different applications that we're seeing come through, and in areas and sectors that are getting much more attention, getting much more funding, but in part because of interest in sustainability, in part because of more and more interest in health and wellness. Are we at a tipping point?
I think so. We know a lot more about fungi now. We know a lot more about microbes in general. New technologies have opened up these sub-visible worlds. And there are so many multiple crises that we face, and that there's so much need for us to take in a more ecological view. Fungi are kind of poster organisms for ecological thinking. And so I think we really are at a tipping point, and I'm delighted to witness it.
So Matt, tipping point, what does that mean for you? When are we going to see MycoWorks products on the market? When can we go and buy them? And how fast are they going to be available?
So we're going to have multiple products on shelves with various brand partners in 2022. And we're going to be excited to announce some of those other brand partnerships soon.
Yeah, Matt told me that he wouldn't give away any secrets on stage earlier. And Simon and Andrew, what about for you? What does a tipping point look like?
I think the tipping point is where, you know, I feel like what we're trying to do is get mushrooms into the cup, 1 cup at a time. So we're not trying to change people's behavior. Like, we don't want people to stop drinking coffee or not have a hot chocolate before bed. We want to try and sort of coalesce with what they're already doing. So I think we want to be in every country. I think we want everyone drinking mushrooms because we know the power it has to make a positive change, both in terms of mental health and also immunity health and physical health. What do you say?
Yeah. Pretty much what he's saying. And there is another part, which is, I think, the moment you do empower people to understand the profound but subtle healing properties of these mushrooms, you can then transcend into the other area, which is certainly the psychedelic part, which is getting a lot of attention, a lot of investment, and is becoming an important conversation to have where many years ago it was suppressed. But now, for the importance of mental health, people are going through their challenges personally, and a time when it's hard to share vulnerabilities as men too. The research in some of the most established institutions from Stanford, Harvard, NYU, I think it's coming to a point where we are with Dirtea, there will be a transition, and there is a psychedelic renaissance. So I think our tipping point is when... Is
that the future of Dirtea? Is that what you're telling us?
Well, I wouldn't say totally that. I just think from the functional side, it's important to allow people to empower the healing benefits, and it is all in spirit. There is a psychedelic renaissance coming. I think people need to be empowered to understand more about mushrooms on both sides.
Well, and what's your take on that side of things? Because obviously, you know, there was a lot of research into this side of things for the 70s, got shut down pretty strictly. Do you have any worries that we could go down that same route again, and all of the progress we made and interest in mushrooms could go back many years as a result?
There are lots of concerns. That's one of them. And it's important to remember that these psychoactive medicines have been used for traditional societies for an unknowably long time. They're deeply bound up in old human cultures, some of which are still around today and still carry this wisdom. And I think one of the risks with the psychedelic movement moving so fast is that some of these voices and knowledge traditions will be marginalized. And so there are lots of risks. But I'm very excited to see it move forward so fast, and for this research to be uncovering so much of what humans have known for such a long time, that these substances can help us step into new ways of thinking, heal our problems, and invite us into a larger state of mind.
Well, thank you all so much for taking the time. I think it's very fitting to have kicked off this session talking about a disruptive force that is billions of years old. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.